and let's just say Greg tends to give me the best authors when he can't make it. Okay, so Greg, you're missed, but not that much, okay? Because this is fun for me, and I'm excited. I know Francesca, so I'm always excited to dive into conversations with you, Francesca. So thanks for hanging out with me on the conversation today.
Thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here.
Oh, I'm telling you, when Greg told me yesterday who, I was interviewing, it was you. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, like no brainer. We have to do this. It's just fabulous. So tell everybody what genre you write in the title of your book.
Sure. Horror dark fantasy is my jam. And the book that just came out is They Hide Short Stories to Tell in the Dark from Brigid Press. It's my love letter to horror tropes. So I've got a witch story in there, a vampire story, ghost story, mummy story, everything that kind of goes dark and bumps in the shadows. That's kind of what I have in my collection.
I love that. So where did your love for that kind of start? Was it just at a young age, or is it something like you newly kind of fell in love with it? Tell us how all this kind of started.
Yeah, so I grew up in a haunted house, like a legit scary poltergeist type haunted house. And there was a lot of unpredictability, things moving around, doors slamming, lights going on and off, TVs going on and off. And so at the age of 6, I wrote my first horror story as a way of kind of processing what I was going through, because we never talked about it as kids, and my parents never believed us. So my first story at the age of 6 was like a 10-pager about a group of kids that stumble onto a haunted house at the end of a cul-de-sac and how they got through it. And so writing has always been a cathartic way for me to process my own fears, and horror genre is a great place to kind of dabble into your fears.
Okay, well, let's dabble in the fact that you lived in an actual haunted house, okay? Because I can't imagine that. Like, I can't even stay in my house. I mean, I can. I do it. I am a big girl. I can do it. But like when my husband goes out of town, it's just me and the kids. I like stay awake on the couch until I'm just like literally passing out, and then I just go to bed. There's just that thing like about the dark, right? Which is so weird because I love to read like horror, psychological thrillers. Like that's my jam. So that's probably why I can't go to bed. But what was that like actually growing up in an actual haunted house and kind of experiencing those things? It had to kind of twist your like perception and stuff when you moved out of that house and those things weren't happening. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, no, it absolutely did. It was terrifying. I mean, but I didn't know any different. That was what I lived through from the ages of 0 to 14. It wasn't until I moved out of the house that I realized what it felt like to not have a presence following you around, to not feel oppressive, to not be fearful 24/7. I mean, it was unpredictable. You're always on edge. You always can't feel like you can take a deep breath or find peace or safety. So it was fairly traumatic. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. People do ghost hunting and things. I'm like, you are braver than I am, because I was forced into that for 14 years, and no thank you. I will write about it. That's a lot funner and safer to do.
Right. So you lived there for 14 years and kind of experienced that. Oh my goodness. That's crazy. So where was your haunted house at? We don't need the address, just the state.
It was Northern California.
Oh, okay. So yes. Okay. So yes, Texans are just no. I feel like in Galveston there's a lot of haunted houses and those things, and so I just don't go in that direction. I skirt on by. We're
Yeah.
just no, we're good. I don't need to upset anybody today. I'm good. So I want to kind of dabble in the fact of how did that influence your writing for They Hide? What did you kind of pull some things off of that in your writing, or how did that kind of work for you?
Yeah, it absolutely did. So there's a couple of stories in They Hide that are almost semi-autobiographical. There's a story called My Brother Andy, and it describes kind of the house that we grew up in, some of the hauntings that took place. Part of it's autobiographical and fiction, part of it's not fiction. So I kind of leave it up to the reader to figure out which is which. But no, I had written that story about 20 years ago as a way of kind of processing and trying to remember all the things that happened, because when you're in trauma like that, a lot of times you forget, because it's a defense mechanism. And so I documented what I remembered at the time so that I could remind myself of how horrific it really was. It wasn't just in my imagination. These things actually did happen. And so there's a couple of stories like that that I talk about or write about in They Hide that explore what it was like feeling and living in that haunted space.
You are braver than I am, Francesca. You're just because I mean the side of anything where I'm like, oh my gosh, did that move? Like I bolt, like I can't do it. So you are much braver than I am. And now you turn that into now you're writing about it and you like dark horror and those kind of things. So where did your love for horror and all that kind of originate? Was there like a movie you saw or a book that you read that kind of just was like, man, I love this? Like I love slasher films.
Right.
That's like my jam. So
Nice.
what was that like for you?
So I have an older sister. She's 10 years older than me. And she was big into Stephen King and Anne Rice when I was little. So like 11, 12 years old, I think I read Stephen King's Salem's Lot. And hearing a lot of different horror authors, that's kind of their foray into horror as well. So I read a lot of that. I also read a lot of Nancy Drew when she did like the paranormal stuff, like, finding the witch or the ghost under the stairs and things like that. So that I was really drawn to girl detective, paranormal investigator type things. So it was mainly books. We weren't really allowed. I grew up in a very strict Catholic household, so we weren't really allowed to watch scary movies or anything like that. So books was our kind of escape into that realm.
I love that though. You always hear, that the books are better than the movies. So I feel like you plant it off right, in reading books, and then the movies at a later date. And you're like, the book was so much better, so much better. Like I hear those all the time. But so, what was your writing process for this book, or just your writing process in general? Are you like very outlined? Are you more of like a pantser? What's your kind of writing flow that has worked for you?
Yeah, I'm totally a pantser. I wish I could say that I had everything figured out in my head before I put one word on the page, but that's not true. But what's fun about being a pantser, meaning you write by the seat of your pants, is that I don't know who the characters are. I don't know where the story is going until it actually starts to come out. And some of the stuff I'm like, oh, that's horrible. I can't believe I just wrote that. Or, oh, that's so scary. I'm just going to give myself nightmares tonight. So I'm kind of being my own first reader as I'm writing it. And it's really a thrill to see where the stories go, the characters that develop and take shape on their own. And it's really only in the editing process that I go back and pretend like I knew what I was doing in the first place.
Right. See, I love that. I think pantsers, in my opinion, right? And I'm not a writer, so my opinion can go out the window, and that's fine. But I feel like you guys are just so like creative because you just do it on the fly and you don't know where it's going to go. Like you let your story kind of take control. I mean, you kind of trim it a little bit, right?
Sure.
And tame it, but you kind of let it just take control. And I love that. Like I've always said that the best things in life are winged. That's like my motto in life, like wing it, fake it till you make it kind of thing. And I feel
That's
like
right.
pantsers, it's so odd. I love that you're a pantser. I feel like if I was a writer, I would be a pantser. One, outlines stress me out. Like I can't even thinking about an outline. I failed outlines in high school. I can't handle it. Okay. So I don't know how you fail an outline, but I did. So I can't do that. So like being a pantser, I feel like is great, but I feel like it just really like opens creativity and just lets it flow. You're not like taming it and sticking to something kind of, as I always found outlines to be very strict and structured. I don't live my life that way.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. And there's parts in different stories that I was writing where I didn't know where it was going, and I would close my eyes and I would say, "Show me what's next. Show me what's next." I just kind of wait until a vision literally showed up in my mind, like I was watching a movie. I'm like, "Oh, what's going on there?" And then I start writing about it, and then it would just start kind of snowballing from there. So there's several moments where I take a breath, I close my eyes, and I'm like, "What happens next? What happens next?" And I see it visually first. And then again, I can feel a tension, or maybe sometimes I'll get like a smell even, and I'll just start writing about that, like a sensory kind of way of writing.
Yeah. See, I love that. I mean, that's working with authors. You hear so many To anybody else, it'd be crazy ideas. Like this character came to me in a dream and their name, and they're like, yeah, no, that's not my name. And this is my personality. But when you work with authors, it's like, yes, like I hear those things all the time. And it's just so fascinating to know and kind of somewhat understand how your guys' minds work when you create these stories, especially, fiction and horror, like especially, and kind of diving into those things and kind of pulling out different horror elements, if you were going to do psychological or thriller, suspense, or slasher, all those kind of things, and pulling them out and how creative you guys can get. Like, I love that. So I love that you're like, I just need to breathe and I'm going to picture this movie and we're going to do it and it's going to just film itself. Like, oh, I love that. Like, that's the most beautiful way to describe that. So,
and dreams are a really good source of inspiration too. One of the stories in They Hide is called A Game of Ghost. And I had a dream of a little girl going down a slide in a playground and not coming out the other end. And that was something that inspired the whole story. And it's about a little girl that literally goes missing right in front of her mother, and how horrifying that must be to any parent, right? Your worst nightmare. You turn your head for 1 second and your child's gone. And so that particular story was inspired completely by a dream that I had.
See, I'm just, even just hearing you say that, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't handle that. Like, I cannot handle that. I have a 3 and a 2-year-old, right? And that's my fear. Like, when I take them out alone into places, I'm just like, no, So, yes, like just, how you get like the adrenaline and the flush of like horror, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine these things, and it hasn't even happened,
Yes.
I love that feeling when it doesn't happen to me. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
when you watch it.
And being a horror writer, for me personally, everyone has a different take on it, but for me personally, writing about my fears, writing about our collective fears, going there, spending time in there, rolling around in our fears, seeing them and facing them head on makes them have less of a grip on us. So it's not as scary. If we just keep putting our fears, pushing them out, we never face them, then they can be overwhelming when something does inevitably, show up. But when you go into those dark places, and feel that fear and experience it in a safe environment like fiction, then if there's something real life that happens, it feels like you're almost better able to handle it in a way. Like you've got a big beam of flashlight that you can just shine into the darkness, into the shadows, and you realize that it's going to be okay. You'll get through it.
Yeah. See, I love that though. Like, it's almost like, when you read, any fiction genre, it really does take you out of reality. But if you ever encounter those things in reality, you kind of almost feel prepared for it because you've read like a scene of it or a chapter of it and those kind of things. So it's not like that. And it is a way to like face your fears in a sense. So I can understand that and I can see that from a reader's perspective. But I want to talk about what's next for you, Francesca. Like, what's next? Are you going to dabble in different genres? Are you going to stick with dark horror? Are you writing another book? I want to know all the juicy details of what's next.
Yeah, so like slashes for you, horror is my jam. Like I love it. Yeah. There's a lot more to explore. So I've got a couple of different projects I'm working on. So another short story collection, kind of a la Hell Hath No Fury, like a woman's scorn type of thing.
Okay.
Of strong female protagonists and villains. And I'm also working on issue 4 of my comic book series, Black Cat Chronicles. And the 4th issue is going to take place in Portland's underground. And that's going to be due out hopefully by fall this year.
Nice. So you do comic books, Francesca? I did not know this.
Yeah, I do.
What made you kind of fall into or dabble in comic books? Did you do that before you started writing, or you just do them simultaneously? How does that work for you?
So my husband and I owned a comic book store called Black Cat Comics in California for about 19 years. And so being a fan of comics, and I've gone to San Diego Comic-Con for a couple of decades and just loved everything around comics. So after a while, we're like, let's put out some comics that we want to read. I haven't seen a lot of true horror type comics, and that's kind of what our jam is with the Black Cat Chronicles. So we put out comics that we self-published because we saw kind of a hole in the market for these particular types of comics. And we just wanted to, create things that we wanted to read.
I love that. I think that's just, I don't know. I think that I hear that all the time from authors is like, I write what I want to read,
Mhm.
right? And I feel like it's, obviously it's the same for you. But I love the whole comic book. Me and Greg are involved heavily in Comic Cons here in Texas. We're putting one on ourselves, our first one in January. So we're super excited about it. But
Rad.
I love that. I had no idea. So if I wanted to check out your comic books or your books, where could I go to find out more about you, Francesca?
So my website has links to everything. It's just francescamaria.com.
I love it. Well, Francesca, it's always so much fun to talk to you. I feel like we could go on for hours. So if I don't end it, Greg's going to get on to me because I can just sense it. But it's always so much fun. Your love for, dark horror and writing and just the passion that it creates for you just radiates. So it's just so much fun to talk to you. And I'm excited for what's next for you. I'm going to have to stay up to date. I'm going to sign up if you have a newsletter so I can stay up to date. But thanks so much for hanging out with me and having this conversation.
Thank you so much. I could have talked to you for another 2 hours.
Well, everybody, Greg will be back again next week. He will be at Black Hills Comic Con this weekend, I believe, and he leaves tomorrow. So until next Tuesday when you see Greg, bye for now from me. Bye, everybody.